Salutations, welcome to Learning the Language of Literacy. My name is Sophia Lee, and today I'll be discussing Everything I Never Told You by Celeste Ng. This book absolutely exploded during the summer of 2014, but surprisingly the Goodreads rating is only a 3.76. What this book really is an intense focus and almost like a study on these 5 people in the Lee family and their relationships with each other. The book opens up with the fact that Lydia, the middle daughter, the perfect one, the one they've placed all their hopes and dreams on, has been found at the bottom of a lake dead. And this makes everything completely just fall apart. There's a lot of truths revealed, a lot of the pressure from everything else just caves in. It's also simultaneously a mystery because no one in the family knows why she died, how she died, if it was suicide, if it was murder. Through their various ways of coping, they piece themselves together and they make themselves much stronger in the light of this tragedy. What makes this book so special is that it follows a mixed race family in the 1970s. It was very interesting for the perspective as well as just the situation and how everything was presented, that there are so many similarities from then and now as well as differences with culture and society in general. I'm just incredibly thankful that we are so progressed and where we are currently. The father, James Lee, is an American history professor, and he is a Chinese American. He actually has never been to China. He's perfectly ensconced in American culture. He is American. He may look Chinese, but he's American just like me. Because we all know I can't understand Chinese to save my life. He experiences so much stigmatism and just racism for who he is, and a lot of people overlook him and they underestimate him and they just think of him as the chink or the Chinaman and all the other really rude racist comments that were people's realities in the 1970s. His wife is Marilyn Lee, and her mom was the home economics teacher at her high school. Marilyn always wanted something different. She didn't want to be the perfect daughter who would just go and grow up and get married to someone and have them take care of her. She wanted to be a doctor. She wanted to go to medical school. She wanted to be independent. They have 3 children, or at least they did have 3 children, the first being Nath, and he is the very overlooked older brother. Over the years, he's just been in the shadow of Lydia and everything that their parents wanted Lydia to be. Whenever he has a victory or something good that happened in his life, they completely just overlook it in exchange for Lydia's issues, her problems, and everything going on with her. Then we have Lydia herself, who is the middle child, the perfect one, the one that the family, and more essentially Marilyn, has put all of her hopes and dreams in, because when she realized she couldn't make them come true, she made everything go to her daughter. And then we have the youngest sister, Hannah, who initially throughout the first, I think like 75% of the book didn't even seem that important, but we got to see her general scope of everything. She's very quiet and perceptive because they pay attention to Nate at least sometimes because he's the oldest one, he's the high schooler. But Hannah, first of all, she wasn't planned. She is actually exiled to the attic and she never feels like she belongs in her own family, but because of this she's learned to cope and how to coexist with everyone while not actually being part of the family. The reason I think this book has a 3.76 is because people don't actually realize the extent of it and they think it might be unrealistic in some points. And from my personal experience, I don't agree with this whatsoever. Even though it focuses on Chinese racism, I think that anyone who's been oppressed or who's encountered racism or is anything other than white could extremely relate to this, and anyone who's just been different. Also, there's a lot of focus on tiger mom / helicopter parents / just people that are so up in their children's business that they can't actually take time for themselves, and they've just focused everything they have, their resources, their time, into their kids. And the unfortunate thing is Marilyn focuses all of her energy on only one kid and pretty much completely ignores the other 2. What I appreciated so much in the story was that it was told in third person, but we heard and saw absolutely everything. It jumped around a lot with the time periods and what was happening when. I didn't find this that confusing, and I think it might have been a lot more clear on the physical page, but I listened to this book as an audiobook. But we kept hearing from when Marilyn and James first met to Nath's acceptance to Harvard and everything working up, and we heard everyone's perspective and where everyone was coming from and just who they actually were. We got inside their heads in a remarkably just well-written way. The thing was, it got confusing because we did hear from 5 of the characters. There's a lot of stress now on diversity. We need it to be more represented, but the thing is, we see it more as a now kind of thing, a demand from now, that things only been brought up now. And yes, because of the fact that everyone's been closeted in more ways than one, we feel like we have so many more gays in our society now. We feel like there's so much more just openness and social justice and speaking out, but it's always been here and it's always existed. And what I find really interesting is that we do encounter a gay character. I'm not going to reveal who it is, it would spoil the story, but it's very interesting how they deal with it and how they just tiptoe around it. Dealing with the whole racism issue. I'm Chinese. I was adopted from Shanghai, China when I was 13 months old and brought to America. I speak perfect English. If you've read any of my writing, I can obviously write well in English. I'm taking French and Spanish at my local high school, and I'm not taking Chinese, and I can understand like 10 words, and that's pretty much it. If you don't know Los Angeles, it's a melting pot. There's everyone and everything. You're bound to find someone that you connect with, and no one is seen as odd. It's kind of like New York City. A year ago, I moved to upstate New York. I've experienced a lot more, not racism so much, but stereotyping than I did before in LA, and that's obvious. I'm now in a small town. There's a lot of jokes going on between me and this other Asian guy. Just because we're both Asian does not mean we have anything in common or like each other. And then there's just a lot more that I've never thought of, and I've never really noticed I was different either until I moved here. And I'm not saying this town is terrible, I'm just saying that my own eyes were opened, and maybe if I had even read this a year ago when I still lived in LA, it would have resonated differently. In terms of pressure from family to do well and be the absolute best, I myself have never experienced this. I'm an extremely driven person. Everything I've done has been for me. I'm not doing it for my parents. I'm not doing it for anyone else. I'm getting good grades because I want to do it and I want to succeed. But I did grow up in a suburb where there were 70% Asians at my school and around 29.9% Hispanic. I did not know or have a single white or black kid in my class of 120. And because of this, I did see so many different examples of tiger moms and dads and just the pressure that kids were put under who, I'm not saying they were going to throw them out, but who were extremely disappointed and yelled and took away privileges just because you might have done poorly on one test. And for the record, the Asian version of poor is a B. There is so much helicopter parenting going on. My parents, they don't actually, not in a bad way, but they don't actually know what I'm doing. Then we see the characters in this novel, as well as just in my own life, how they know exactly what their kids' homeworks are. They're on School Tool or whatever grading website. They know the teachers. They've gone in for conferences. They want to hear every single detail about who their kids are hanging out with, what they're doing with their free time, and not letting their kids actually have any free time and scheduling every possible thing under the sun into their children's lives. I don't agree with this kind of parenting, and it's being controlling and not letting a kid grow up and experience things for themselves and have their own freedom. What I loved most out of everything in this story were the relationships and the characters themselves. They were so complex, and I loved how everyone, they dealt with grief differently because they all came from different positions. And with the full scope that Celeste Ng gave us, we didn't get to see just where Nath came from, we didn't get to see where just Hannah came from, but we got to see how everyone became who they were and why, and it was justified. It was really interesting to see how everyone dealt with grief differently. The one, I don't know, complaint so much I would have had, but just the question was, when the frick does it end? Because we had such a jumpy timeline, because we were going so many different places, 1,000,000 miles per hour, I wasn't always sure exactly of when it was going to end. During the last section of the audiobook, I actually was thinking every time there was a slight pause, this is the end. That was good. I'm satisfied. And while I wasn't actually in love with the very last chapter and the sentence and the way that it ended in terms of the actual text of it, I loved the novel. I probably should have told you my rating ages ago, but I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars and 90%. I absolutely loved it. It's not a 5 out of 5 stars, mostly because it didn't blow me away. Overall, this is a solid book with great characters and a very interesting story to tell because we have all the aspects of the mystery. But it's just the very tip of the iceberg. And for the record, by the end of the story, while you do care how Lydia died, it's not even that much of a focus anymore. It's more of seeing how everyone has survived without her because yes, it is terrible that she died. It seems so plausible that suicide happened because of all the pressure and no one valued her for herself. And by the way, do you like this new filming location? It's not actually gonna be a permanent thing. I'm tired today and my bed is very soft and comfy. I'm probably not even in frame anymore, but I don't care. Anyways, I'm going to start spoiling the heck out of the story right now, so you might want to go away and come back once you've read it. We're introduced to the character of Louisa pretty early on in the story, and Lydia did believe that her father was cheating on her mother with her, and at that point Louisa wasn't. I've never been in this situation before. I'm not an adult. I don't have the age or the experience or the knowledge really, but I just feel that if you've gotten so close with your teaching assistant to a point where it's just so comfortable between you, where it's not even that professional anymore but more of a friendship level, or even more in this case, that you probably should just distance yourself from her. And I get it, it's hard. James's wife, Marilyn, was seeming so different from the woman that he initially married, and especially after Lydia's death, he had to be driven somewhere into someone else's arms. But simultaneously, I feel like he could have drowned himself in drugs or the bottle or just something else that was toxic that didn't have to be Louisa. And while it was interesting and it brought a whole new level to everything, and I did enjoy her character overall, I think that it could have had the same effect if it was any other toxic relationship or thing going on that wasn't cheating. And I did find it interesting how the two of them, they've just found solace in each other so completely, and how Louisa herself didn't seem to have that many, I don't know if I want to say morals, but just qualms about sleeping with her college professor. I think James really needed some therapy. Besides the whole being driven to Louisa, we're going to focus on the racism. I feel like he had so much pent up frustration and bitter feelings towards being Chinese and towards his upbringing and his parents themselves and the language and the culture. Mental illness and going to a therapist wasn't frowned upon or wasn't seen as a possibility at all back in those days. But I feel like if the story had been set now, he really could have gotten the help he needed and not felt so darn penned in by the stupid color of his skin and the way he looked. Because yes, I get it, he's Chinese. Again, this is me not really understanding that properly because I'm so privileged and lucky to be living where I do now. Then there's Hannah. I loved that one scene, you know what I'm talking about, when she's describing how she knew that Nate wasn't bad and how he got that tear in his eye for who she thought was Lydia. And the tear of love might have been for Lydia, but we also know Nate ended up gay. And just the overwhelming love and emotion and compassion and just empathy he had for the entire family, even though him and Nath never did have the best history. And everything happened because of a misunderstanding when Nath was just really young and he didn't know what he was talking about, he didn't know any better, he was distraught, and Jack was trying to just be nice and reach out to him and give him his Swedish fish. While I did hate the way that her children interpreted her and how most of us as readers received her, I loved Marilyn's character for the way that I understood where she was coming from, because she just felt so trapped and penned in by her own family. And while that's terrible, I also understand that we, modern 21st century women, we have a problem balancing it and quote-unquote having it all between work and a family and free time and just being who we want to be, going after our own career goals and aspirations while still being the proper mother and perfect person. Do all the household cleaning and cook all the food and do all the shopping. And that's not possible nowadays, and I'm so glad that we're breaking out of this mold, but in the 1970s, I completely understand it. What I don't approve of is how she basically just put all of her hopes and dreams into her daughter. I know it's kind of a trope, and that was a common complaint in the reviews, that it was like, Mom puts all her focus on her kid, but we do see very clearly where she's coming from and how her own dreams and hopes were just cracked because of it. I thought it was very interesting also to make Jack's mom a doctor, Mrs. Wolfe, and someone that everyone respected so highly, and how Marilyn looked at her and was like, that could have been me, that could have been my life if this family hadn't stood in my way. Then we have Nate. I understood where he was coming from, how he felt so overshadowed by his perfect sister. He cracked, he knew he had to just get away because no one else would care for him any other way, and he of course got into Harvard, which is an amazing accomplishment, but the minute that Lydia told the family that she was failing in physics, all the attention, obviously it went to her, not Nate, and I felt very bad for him. A lot of the story he spent just really angry at Lydia and life and the way everything had turned out. I don't blame him, but it was a very interesting way to see his character. I don't know what Lydia was thinking. I don't know why the story ended the exact way it did. Why did she have to go into the water, feel herself submerge, when she knew that she can't swim and that she wouldn't be able to pull herself out, and then it's like the middle of the night and no one's going to be there to pull her out? And I get it, there was the whole memory, which I love the way it was executed and written, where Nath pushed her in because of the pressure, and how in her little 10-year-old eyes she knew that it had gotten to be too much and would continue being so much for her, and she wouldn't be capable to handle it either. And how he pushed her in, but then immediately he felt bad and brought her out. But this was the time when Nath, he wasn't there for her, and so much had built up between them that he wasn't going to be there, and then no one would pull her out. And it was a sad, just cruel accident, and you felt very just terrible that it had to happen this way, because you saw that the family could redeem itself in everyone's eyes but of course it only happened because she died. The ending, it wasn't the best in terms of how things happened and how things came to be, and that fight between Nath and Jack, and I don't know if anything would ever come between them. I don't know if Nath is actually gay himself, or if the love is going to remain unrequited forever. However, if they did, I totally ship it. I know I was really scattered with the spoiler section, but I want to hear your thoughts as well. Anyways, tell me in the comments below whether you've read this novel, what you think of it, and all the different aspects and topics I touched up on. If you appreciated it and understood where everyone was coming from, because I completely did. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Keep calm, read on, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye!